for joining us, the Wealthy Retailer Podcast with your host, Dan Holman. Every episode, Dan dives into the retail headlines that matter to you, the independent retailer, covering topics ranging from retailer inventory, technology, marketing, retailers' questions, and more. The Wealthy Retailer Podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. Learn more at retailbycrs.com. And now, here's Dan Holman.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wealthy Retailer Podcast. Here we are for the week of April 22nd. Sun shining this morning, Rob. Beautiful day. What say you today?
Well, I'm a bit of a happy man. I figure I'll stop losing my keys. I saw Apple's got a new Apple tag, and I can attach it to everything I don't want to lose anymore. The song, The Cat Came Back, you'll know because you have a tag on him. But no, other than that, great sunny day out, and lots of good stuff on tap here, and ready to get busy. How about you?
Yeah. Let's have at her.
Okay, good stuff. Great headlines this week. One, talking a story about staffing preparedness and more importantly, customer satisfaction as it relates to the omnichannel world. Great story, talking with a number of executives there and looking forward to your thoughts. We talked about the sunshine, so lots of it coming. And with that is summer patio opportunities. Last year was definitely more, I'd say, a food and beverage thing, but we're going to talk about the impact on retailers and what they might be able to do. And, retail's worst kept secret. We've chatted about this before, but it's still there, the growing returns problem. And you've got a good question of the week, the 3 C's of marketing, zeroed in on a bit more in content. So yeah, you've got some thoughts there, and I know you're going to put me on the spot to come up with an idea or two. And
only seems fair.
I'm ready for it, man. I'm ready for it. Okay, our first story comes from morningbrew.com. And as I said, it was, zeroes in on, they talked to 6 retail executives, asked them to weigh in on their omnichannel store staff.
They're not Amish.
And not this week. But the question was, how did they maintain their customer satisfaction across all channels, but at the same time expanding the omnichannel experience? What jumped out at you here, Dan?
Well, yeah. So totally, this came from what we usually see as Morning Brew actually has another version called Retail Brew, Rob. And this story was kind of posted in that Retail Brew theme. It's a great little cup of coffee read in the morning. This newsletter comes out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And this article that we're talking about, or this newsletter, blog, if you will, published on just this past Monday. And it had their Ask an Expert theme. And this was the first in a 3-part series on this omni-channel, e-commerce and the workforce. Sort of the heading there. So as we've seen and will continue to see, click and collect sales increase steadily. A McKinsey study titled Adapting to the Next New Normal in Retail, or the Next Normal in Retail. I'll pause. If you want a copy of this study, it's a great read through. Just send an email to dan@thewealthyretailer.com and I'll shoot you a copy of this study over. And Rob will also put a link to it in our story or in our weekly newsletter. So this study that McKinsey did was on the next normal in retail, and the customer experience sort of imperative found that omni-channel models have these ultra high retention rates, with 56% of customers saying they'll continue using buy online, pick up in store, post-pandemic, whatever that is, somewhere in our not too distant future. So for many retailers, stores are now acting as mini fulfillment centers. And here, as we move across Canada, Rob, we're seeing, more effing closures of brick and mortar retail stores. And their only choice is fulfillment. Right. So pushing that out. And this means that the employees who were once responsible for styling clients, ringing up orders, restocking displays, now have this wider range of duties, including handling, curbside pickups if available, assisting customers with, in some cases, self-checkouts, and fulfilling online orders. And that's just to name a few of the changed what we're going to call duties for someone that's working in retail.
On the staffing front,
yeah, on the staffing side. And so Retail Brew spoke to six executives or managers attempting to strike a balance between staffing preparedness and customer satisfaction in their omnichannel world. And these retailers, have seen sustained success in-store and online sales during the pandemic. You'll recognize, lots of the names. I'll sort of rhyme off the six that answered that question. How did you maintain customer satisfaction across all channels, and further expanding, your omni-channel presentation? The experts were Richard Armour, who's the senior vice president at Michaels, Kessia Steelman, who's the COO or CTO, CSO, Chief Store Operations. I'll get all these C words down here.
Yeah,
he's the Store Operations Officer at Ulta Beauty, great store. Chris Hurt from Build-A-Bear Workshop, Garrett Putney from Madwell, John Wampy, who's the VP of Global Omni at Foot Locker, and then, of course, Tom Nolan, who is the CEO at Kendra Scott. And I loved Tom's response. It really resonated with me because I could easily sort of connect it to my indie world. And I'm going to quote Tom here. Tom says, we're a unique organization, for a lot of reasons. We are nimble, fast moving, and like to pivot when we have to. We take chances and try things, and we're okay to fail as long as we do it quickly. I think this serves us really, really well because we didn't have to really change our behaviors going into COVID. Perhaps some tech adjustments, needed to be made. They basically turned all of their stores into mini distribution centers. And there was a big technology swing that had to do that, but it allowed them to really do two things as they pivoted. We'll call it pivoted, in that first instance or first rise in our pandemic, sort of through the first and into the second wave. First and foremost, they had to get their customer the product that he or she wanted and how they wanted it. And number two, the shift in technology allowed them a pretty significant workforce in store, that were normally furloughed or sent home. So they ended up taking this strategy they had for summer of this year, 2021, in seamlessly integrating digital and physical. I think we called it phygital, didn't we?
Digital. Yep. Let's get phygital.
Yeah. So their intention was to pull this into this summer. Well, they accomplished it in about 9 months ahead of time. And when a retailer reacts quickly to that shifting customer need or customer behavior, they feel the benefit of that. And we've talked about with others, it's easy because, it's easy for some because they're viewed as a bigger organization. Well, the truth is Kendra Scott is not that big of an organization. They are small enough and really following, what we would like to coin as the wealthy retailer path. They are lean, they're nimble and prepared to accept and make change in their business to follow their customer. And here we are, 14, 16, whatever it is, months, 13 months into this pandemic, and we're still seeing retailers not pivoting. Still seeing retailers wallow in the days that have gone by. And Tom really highlighted where they had good success at Kendra Scott. And listen, every one of our fashion retailers is going to know Kendra Scott. And maybe in some cases feel like, yeah, I know Kendra Scott. They compete with me every day because they have a store down the road. But Kendra Scott really made her life in indie retail. I mean, that's where she really launched. And this example of a corporate store, we'll call it a corporate store, being nimble and shifting and aligning some technology that we talked about last week on the podcast, how important that is to allow it to breed some efficiency into your organization. And really, at the end of the day, satisfy the customer. That's what's most important.
Tom's words, really jumped out at me too, Dan, and on that part where they were planning for this disruption, this change, a new approach to business, and it just, made it that much quicker.
Escalated it.
But a great takeaway, I think, for many here is to really look at this is the genie's out of the bottle. This is the change. It's happening. It's not going to, like you said, month 15, all of a sudden we're just going to all revert back to the way it was. And so really embracing that change and finding a way to, manage it through these omnichannel experiences. But and I've said this a few times before, what excites me is it's forced this change into what truly is new markets for a lot of these retailers. When we do get back to the norm, they're hopefully still going to
have a bigger audience,
their geographical footprint, but they've opened up all these new channels and they know how to deal with it now. And very exciting on
this, this article really started with the statement that e-com makes up a third of all, non-automotive retail, that it is this big giant. And it is quite likely to grow. I'm going to remind everyone that retail saw growth in the last 12 months, right? In Canada, I think retail growth, non-automotive growth, was non-automotive, non-grocery, non-pharmacy, grew at 3.5% in Canada. So we've seen retail growth, and we're going to continue seeing retail growth. And the teeter-totter between, digital and physical sales will probably get closer to balanced as we move forward. And as sort of you've highlighted, Rob, my market share is getting broader and broader as I expand my reach with my e-com channels. And that's, what this article started to speak to. But the most important thing, I think, that became the takeaway here is that they didn't have to furlough all their retail employees. They realigned their duties. And that speaks to you having the right employees who are prepared to realign, readjust, and totally adapt to, today's world. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, Dan, next story, running back to Saskatoon. Spent some time in that town, played a little hockey there. Great city.
Yeah, I thought so.
Comes from CTV News, a story about, as the sun starts to shine more, we're seeing more and more, the extension into the outdoors, especially, there's still a lot of hotspot areas where indoor shopping, indoor dining is being challenged. And so this story talks about some of the benefits that the food and beverage enjoyed, but kind of zeroes in that, at least for the first year, retailers didn't really jump on this opportunity. What were your thoughts here, Dan?
Yeah. CTV Saskatchewan brought us this article. Saskatchewan. That's from a movie, and I'm trying to think of which it is, and it's going to come to me.
Adam Sandler.
Oh yeah, totally grown-ups. Yes. Saskatchewan. Hey, ladies. Saskatchewan. Oh man, listen, you've got to appreciate a retailer that's willing to step outside the traditional and piggyback off of the food and beverage asphalt patio initiative. Tons and tons of communities adopted this strategy last summer, and we've seen many of them doing it again this spring. I'm going to say I've never seen so big outdoor patios. Yeah. I mean, so much so that we've got some that are, orange construction fence built, but they're taking dining outdoors where they're allowed to do it. And these guys are pushing the boundaries, and we love that. We want nothing but success for anybody that's in food and beverage. They've had a very, very difficult year. And this article really was headlined, Rob, at saying, Saskatoon coffee shop has doubled their size. And that's not really the story here. Yes, they doubled their size, but I think it's about how Ben Quattrini, the director at the boutique on Broadway Avenue in Saskatoon, takes this idea of using the space in front of his store as a patio to sell his product. Ben goes on to be quoted in the CTV News article saying, it just gives us more area to accept our customers and work with our customers and all of those additional products that we can put out there. It gives us this ability to create a little more space. And during COVID, space seems to be a good thing for these cats. So any retailer that has the opportunity and the inventory, should be looking to take up this idea, pop up a tent, get your rolling racks out, do whatever you have to do to make it look like there's something exciting happening and generate a little more activity in and around your store. And now I'm going to have this, Rob, retail audience, not a big one, but there will be a retail audience that's sitting there going, oh my God, it's too much work, or I don't have time, or some other bullshit excuse not to try to do more, get more, be more for their customer. If that's you, forget we mentioned it, sit back and watch others, give it a go and find some success here. We have long used this rolling rack strategy to get things out on the street. Yep. And cities, landlords have always been opposed to us living out on the street with our retail store. Well, here you have an opportunity to get outside and not pay 1 cent more in rent, in tax. Yeah. Maybe you've got to pay more to staff it, but that should be connected to revenue, right? Traffic. But just get out there and show some more excitement. I applaud Ben and his strategy, to piggyback off food and beverage. Let's throw up a fence in front of my store. I'm allowed to take up, depending on your landlord and your store and your city, 2, 3, 4, 5 parking stalls now in front of your store. They're your property to display on or to do business on. Yeah. And food and beverage is winning in this race. Retailers got to catch up and think out of the box. If you've got the inventory, let's get out there and let's have some fun with this idea.
You talk about the rolling racks, Dan. Yeah. So I'll ask the question, is there, when it comes to displays or to that tent, and I'm sure there's many listening right now thinking, okay, I want to do something, but what's not enough and what's too much in just getting set up to go outdoors? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, listen, here we are today. In Canada, it's going to be 20 degrees. In Western Canada, it's going to be 20 degrees today. There's no reason that you can't put 5 or 6 rolling racks out there and park an employee outside greeting customers. And whether that is, so the question, too little, too much, it really depends on what you have and what you're able to accomplish. Yep. If you're a solopreneur, you can't be inside and outside. You can't be engaged in your change room while you've got stuff going on outside. But if you have multiple people in your organization, if you've got, that great salesperson that always takes Thursdays off, or doesn't work Thursdays, maybe get her to come in Thursday afternoon and run the outside and just see what happens. And even if it's just an opportunity to greet the passers, to just say good morning, good afternoon. Yep. Come on in and have a chat with us, something that engages that audience. And now this is really, Rob, where we're seeing a lot of this isn't necessarily in a standalone store. You typically in a standalone can do just about anything you want in a parking lot. Yep. But if you're in a strip center, you've got 3 or 4 spaces in front of your store, man, grab a $100 pop-up tent. Let's do something outside to create some excitement. Everybody loves a tent sale.
Milk jugs filled with water to weight those suckers down, though. Remember that?
Not hard to weight them down.
I think you talk about the solo entrepreneur. I even if you can't go out there, maybe think of that space as a window display. Maybe throw a few mannequins out there and have some fun with it.
Be creative.
Yeah, totally. And just a great little opportunity to stand out, get noticed, and do what you can. Because as you said, right now it takes a little bit more energy to try. Yeah,
you got to do more to get more. And listen, for that person that's the naysayer, that the glass is always half empty. This is more work. Somebody's going to steal it. It's going to come. You got to get past the negative, and you've got to always be thinking about what's the opportunity, not what the cons are, but what the pros could be. And if you're not sure what those pros are, pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Reach out and say, hey, I heard you on your podcast talking about doing something in front of my store. Can you give me some ideas that would help me? I'm going to ask 3 or 4 questions that help me better diagnose a solution for you.
This podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. We've been empowering retailers across North America for 30 years with the latest in point-of-sale technology, best-in-class support, merchandise intelligence with open-to-buy planning, and much more. CRS has the retail solution to help take your retail business to the next level of success. Visit retailbycrs.com to learn more. Remember, Canadian Retail Solutions exists to help make you, the independent retailer, better.
Okay, Dan, let's talk about our next story here. Comes from chainstorage.com. Retail's worst kept secret, growing returns problem. This stat just jumped out. 2020 U.S. retail returns totaled $428 billion with a B, just over 10% of the retail trade. We've chatted about this a bit before. Keep reinforcing it. What are some thoughts here, Dan?
Well, Rob, I mean, the biggest thing is, yes, returns are perhaps the worst kept secret in retail. But the big secret is how they negatively affect your store, your customer, and your bottom line. And back in March, I don't know, it might be a month ago now, we had a retailer question from Rachel in Mooresville, North Carolina, and we touched on return policies. And while this article goes deeper than the policy and how the impact, how a policy impacts retailers, it speaks to avoiding retailer-caused returns as well. E-commerce's average return rates are 2 to 3 times than product bought in your store in the same category. So if I'm selling t-shirts online and in my brick and mortar store, I'm going to get 1 return in my brick and mortar store, and I'm going to get 2 or 3 returns in e-commerce. And most of our current conversations on returns are focused on how to improve the shopper's return experience. And this article's authors, I wish I could pronounce their names, really great. We'll have a link to it here. I would totally mess it up, and nobody likes to have their name messed up. But this article's authors wanted to explore a few fundamental questions. Why do returns occur? What can retailers do to reduce the incident and cost of returns? And what things can we do to mitigate returns? So these guys partnered with Incisive. Incisive is one of those study houses. So they did this hybrid study, and I pulled a couple of findings for us to just chat about. So retailers see a large improvement opportunity in return rates. Retailers in the survey reported an average annual return rate of 11%, but only 3% of them responded that the current return rate was optimal. The remaining believe there's opportunity to reduce return rates by about 30%. And so for an omnichannel retailer with a blended return rate of 10%, it amounts to 3% of your annual revenue. One of the other things that came out of this is that retailers just totally lack understanding on what the cost of a return really is. Less than half of retailers track a financial impact of their return. And virtually no one, I think the number was 4%, track the impact of returns on their customer, on their brand, or on the environmental factors. We've got some pretty good examples of where we're letting ourselves down environmentally, where vendors are letting ourselves down. Some of the greatest advocates, for environment are shipping things out 1 and 2 and 3 at a time instead of holding. And so that is also causing us some grief. So less than half of the retailers are tracking the financial cost of their return, and barely anyone, 0, is measuring this impact that we talk about, whether it's on environment or anything else. And I think that this lack of conversation amongst retail leaders is embarrassing. This should be something that we're focused on. Customer returns should be a scorecard number that's tracked and trended. And when that number goes off track, we take action to fix it. And we've got to look inside an article like this to say, hey, wait a minute, not all returns are shopper driven. Many are retailer driven. And 6,200 return transactions measured across all non-food retail categories, inclusive analyzed the shopper's reason for return and found that 70 this number's 73% of returns occur due to a retailer controlled action or inaction. For example, shopper returned a purchase due to inaccurate product description, a wrong item, or the wrong SKU sent by, fulfillment error by the retailer, or an issue with product fit. These are avoidable returns, and every retailer has to have a strategy in place to review, audit, and improve their, retail return rates. And we're not doing that well enough today, and not recognizing that if I can improve my customer returns by a third, it's throwing 3% back down to my, in my annual sales line.
Amazing to learn. Like I would say, our poor customers are taking the brunt of the load of the blame game when it comes to returns. But hearing this, that over 70% of it is, it's back on us.
It's back on us,
it's
right?
Our systems and processes, and to your point, just not enough people have an even understanding of what's causing the returns in there, but just overgeneralize it that darn customers.
It's Karen. Karen, but it's not. We should be looking. Listen, you've been in sales for a long time, Rob. Whenever we have a miss, we ask ourselves, what could I have done better? Yep. Right? And in this return scenario, we blame the customer every single time, no matter what. Rarely will we say, oh my God, we're screw ups here. We're, sending the wrong product. We're not putting good descriptions. We've got the wrong descriptions. We don't have any sizing. There's no size scale. There's no size referencing. So somebody that's a large ends up buying, one of your Euro larges, and it fits like a medium, and they return the thing because, well, how are they supposed to know? Yep. We come from this apparel world that is very, very tactile. I mean, I'm not going to order something online unless I'm 1,000% sure it's going to fit me, right? And you look for, where is it coming from? Where's their size scale? And looking at, a retailer's website, looking for that. I mean, sizing is the number one reason products come back. But if that makes up 7 out of 10 of your returns, shit, we got a bigger problem than, but just inequalities in the imagery, in the description, in sizing, in picking orders. The wrong thing gets picked and packed, whether it's a size or SKU that's wrong. Those things are all avoidable. And unless we're talking about it, you'll never avoid them.
We've talked in the past, Dan, of your planning your week and, your agendas with yourself as the owner of the team. Here's one, return review, be it once a month or once a week with the team, and just making sure that there's dialogue around it, whether it's with yourself or with your team members.
Well, customer returns should be a scorecard number. It should be a retailer scorecard number that gets measured. I mean, scorecard every single week. I'm putting a number down on my scorecard, and I score myself every week. And that doesn't mean I'm only looking at necessarily the last 7 days. I could be looking at an average of the last 30 days and saying, look, the average of return rate in the last 30 days is dot. Yep. And every week I'm using that. What's my return rate for the last 30? So 1 week falls off, 1 week adds on. Yep. And so if the number sneaks up or sneaks down, you're doing a better or poorer job. But you've got to have a scorecard in your business. It can be the most simplistic scorecard in the world, but you've got to have something that keeps your finger on the pulse of the business, a data-driven scorecard.
Yeah. Where's your scorecard, Robbie? The dog ate it. I don't know.
The dog ate it.
Okay, Dan, retailer question of the week. It's a gooder. Let's hear it. What do you got?
So this came from Barb, and Barb emailed, I don't know what time the podcast launched last week, but it was in the morning. I got this email from Barb. And she said, hey, Dan, last week you talked about, or on your podcast this week, you talked about the 3 C's of marketing. And I completely understand consistency and customer, but not sure about my content. Can you share some tips on creating good content for a women's boutique? P.S. I'm a mixtape mom.
There we go.
Let's take a jump backwards.
She's rocking the 80s tape.
Yeah. Zulily did a study of its audiences and recategorized their consumers in three ways: a TikTok mom, a Facebook mom, and a mixtape mom. 24 to 34, 34 to 44, 44 to 54. And this happened to be a mixtape mom. And I said, good on you, I'm a mixtape dad. So let's chat. So, as I told Barb, I am not a marketing guru. I know just enough to be dangerous. And what I've learned comes from being surrounded by really good marketers. And when it comes to content, Rob, it just so happens, we've got this guy that's all about content on the cast with us today. And so Rob's going to share. I'm going to ask Rob to weigh in on some of this as well. But for me, content comes from three sources. It's your who, your why, and your what. Who you are, who your team is, and who your brand is. Why you do what you do, why you buy what you buy, and why she should buy from you. Now, this is not, your connection to her is that why. It can't be about pricing. That's not why she's buying from you. It cannot be about price. And then we have the what. And the what is all about your inventory. And there are three sources to draw from in inventory. Number one is new arrivals. And new arrivals should be showcased with style sessions, live or recorded, poses. And lastly, and definitely the least important, is a flat lay. If you're not or don't have a model that you can do a live style session or snap some images, snap some photos, then go ahead and do a flat lay. Something's better than nothing when it comes to showcasing that inventory. So that's your new product. Number two is the sources where you have an overage in inventory, where you're bought very deep or you're holding a lot as you move through a season. This product needs to be highlighted to be moved, and you've got to continuously showcase it. Don't think about, I have nothing new to show my customer. Remember, if you've got a 20% open rate on your newsletter, that means you've got an 80% unopen rate. If you've got a 20% closing ratio in your store, that means you've got 80% of the people that didn't buy. And remember, people aren't buying because they're on sensory overload. So continue to show and re-show inventory that you have a glut in or where you're bought deep. You've got to highlight it to move it. Yep. And then number three is your best sellers, or what you believe or want to showcase as your best sellers. Everybody wants to buy popular items, and you should showcase them that way. So, Rob, what are some other tips for steering content?
Yeah, it's a great question, Barb. You get stuck with what do we do? I'm not sure. And you just laid out a great set of, when it comes to product in the store, that approaches that they can take. I'm going to liken it to your view of store inventory. You talk about the different classifications, that the importance of having that mix in your store when it comes to your inventory. I would offer that it's important to have that mix in your content as well, that it's not just all the same type of content. And to when you break it down that way, it kind of pushes you, the creative challenge, the friction of, okay, I'm gonna, every 10th post, we want to do something humor driven, just as a something a little bit different, and maybe it's community driven, maybe it's partner driven, things that extend beyond, of course, the mainstay, the products in the store, the services, the team, and all of that. But think of different ways that spreads it out a little bit, that it's not always just that, because there's gonna, you've got your rabid fans, they're right there, they want to know everything that's going on. And then the outer layer and the outer layer. And I tend to think that there's content out there that, reaching out, touch points on different things in your community, or other, bring attention to other similar independent businesses that, even whether they compete or don't, you'd be surprised how all of a sudden they're doing some shout outs your way.
Right. And that speaks to to who you are. When I say showcase who you are, it is who you are as a person.
Totally.
It's who you are as a member of your community, the things that you support, and you're going to find that your core audience, your rabid fans, have a similar belief system or a similar value system as you do. That's the attraction. And there does need to be attraction. People, have to be attracted to you in your store, attracted to the level of service that you provide. And that's about who you are. And so there does need to be this comfortable blend of who you are, why you do what you do. And that's, Rob, can speak to your community initiatives. That can speak to some cause marketing. This month I'm giving a proceeds from sales, or a proceed or a portion of my sales to, the Sturgeon Community Hospital Foundation. That cause is so near to my heart. My mom spent her last days there, or I had my baby there, and the people in that facility are wonderful, and I'm going to support them this way. Well, that starts to pull an audience together. We come together to support that cause. And that's a little bit about, why. And that's the ability for you to say, I'm in this business, in this community, so that I can give back to this community. That's, I give to myself, I fill my bucket up, and the minute my bucket is full, I then start filling up other people's buckets. And when you start to share content like that, who you are and why you're doing what you're doing, you start to gather this loyal following, or you expand the loyal following that you have. Always, always, always last on my list is the what. Nobody cares what you're doing. They want to know why you're doing it. They want to know why you bought it. They don't care what you bought. They'd rather know why you bought what you bought than what you bought. Right.
Well, and Barb talked about, her classification of being the mixtape mom too. And just to maybe end on, within that, creating different classifications of your content, maybe to stretch your comfort as the owner, as the store as a whole, that, okay, we're going to, once every 2 weeks, we're going to make a TikTok video. Like we're going to move into a different, but not worry about that. I've got to be there fully. And again, I think creating these little different classifications within the types of content, the channels for the content, and to your point of like, what does that message serve, at least starts in the elements of a plan, and from there, then you work on making it better, right?
We chatted yesterday. It's funny. One of our clients, a buyer for one of our stores, her name is Jess. She's in Vermont. And she said, hey, I just listened to some of your podcasts, and, I'm a mixtape mom. I really identified with when I was doing my shopping, with the way that Zulily had sort of lined up that. And this is part of your content, isn't just what you're putting out. I mean, Barb went on to say that she was consistent. She knew her customer and was looking for, what should I put in my content? Well, I sort of gave her my three, the who, the why, and the what, product, the why I do what I do, and who I am. But it's just as important to know what silo your customer's fitting in, or what category she fits in, and when you should be posting. This mistake that retailers have of posting at 10 a.m. doesn't give them a lot of analytics. We should be posting at multiple times, throughout the day, throughout the week, and then going back and measuring which one, what was the content, a summary of the content. Was it a live or a still, or what was it? And what was the engagement? Impressions and engagement. We should be looking at the number of impressions and the number of engagement, and coming up with, hey, listen, if I get 1,000 impressions, I'm getting 300 engagements. I've got a 30%, engagement rate.
Right on. Well, good luck to you, Barb. And just start, right? Like, you work on making it better as you go along, and don't get too hung up on that perfect plan. Doesn't exist.
I feel like retailers get caught up in, the fear of putting themselves out there, or the fear of doing a live and having an oops, or, fucking something up. Well, guess what? We all will mess up. Every single one of us. And it's not that big a deal. there's no bloopers reel for you to go over. And bloopers, was a number one show for a reason.
I was gonna say,
puts a smile on people's face.
You literally could take all your oops, put it into one video, and there's another classification of content.
And it's going to get some views. Yeah. Hey, listen, Barb, thank you so much for sending the question in, and of course allowing me to share the question here on the podcast. Retailers, if you've got a question, you don't have to be as on the ball as Barb and email it 9 minutes after it completes, but just send an email to dan@thewealthyretailer.com. We'll get you an answer to the question. Maybe we'll load it up on the podcast with your permission, and share it, for the greater good of our retail lives, for the greater good of our retail community. And for sure, you got to check out our weekly newsletter over at retailbycrs.com. We'll have copies of all of the articles in this podcast, plus some others that Rob's going to sort of cruise over here right now. And then, get that newsletter every week. There's tons of good stuff there.
Right on. Well, speaking of those extra stories, Dan, we got a few more that'll be coming their way. A story about a consignment model that is kind of unique among subscription boxes. So that one was interesting. Lots of stories about Shopify and their growth, but this particular story, this next one, talks about some different trends. One of them being the significant growth in first-time entrepreneurs. Like this is their first kick at the can, and they're going into the e-commerce world. And then we're seeing lots of it, but a story about the retail shift to temporary spaces. So I'm sure that will be of interest to many out there. So thanks for listening, folks.
Thank you.
Subscribe, pass it along, do a huge for a good friend of you, and tell them that they should be listening to this each week.
And don't be afraid to drop a comment on whatever your favorite podcast platform is that you're listening to. We'd love to see some comments over there, and love to see the comments that are coming and the messages that we get. We're so appreciative of it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great retail week.